Hey guys, it is the Comics Kid 2099, and I am here to finish talking about this indie shelf that I started talking about, I guess, roughly 2 weeks ago by the time this video goes up. As I am filming this, I am still recovering from being a little bit sick, so my voice is not what it once was, but that's okay. This video is probably not going to take as long as my last collection video. It took me, I think, 50 minutes to talk about roughly half of this level of this bookcase. This remaining half of this level is a lot of complete series or series that are not yet complete but still a series, so it won't take me nearly as long to talk about. So starting, speaking of series, The Sixth Gun. I don't know if I've said this before on my channel, but this is actually currently my favorite ongoing comic book series. I'm just going to pull this one out part of the way. It is a supernatural western, I guess is the best way to put it. There's a lot of not really political intrigue, but kind of spy drama. If you were a big fan of the Wild Wild West TV series, there's kind of an element of that going on. When I first heard the plot, I thought it sounded very similar to The Lord of the Rings, but transposed onto the Western genre instead of a sword and sorcery type genre. But it's actually, in my opinion, I enjoy it a lot more than The Lord of the Rings. I know that's probably sacrilege. I know a lot of people think that J.R.R. Tolkien can do no wrong, but in my opinion, this is one of the greatest comics currently being put out. I believe the fifth volume is going to be coming out very, very soon. I know that earlier this year there was a spin-off miniseries called, what was it? The Six Horsemen or something like that. It was I don't remember what it was called. It'll come to me later, but it was about some of the villains that they fight in this first volume. So Cullen Bunn is really killing it here. I am very much looking forward to, I don't want to say I'm looking forward to it ending. I'm looking forward to being able to read this entire saga when it's all finished and just being able to read it all at once, because I've read all four of these and there's elements that have been introduced that haven't yet been followed up on. So I'm curious if he's planning, how long he's planning to let this go on, and I think it's going to be one of the greats of the 2000. The Mice Templar. I've only read this once. I didn't especially like it when I read it because I was sick when I read it, and not recently. This was years ago. I feel like if I read it again, I would probably like it a lot more. But also, I felt like it was very similar to Mouse Guard, which somewhere I have one volume of Mouse Guard. It's a lot more supernatural than Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard feels more grounded, I guess. This feels more epic. It's very fun, and it's, a thick book. You'll be getting your money's worth if you buy that. It's, a sword and sorcery story with mice forming a group. There's some evil rats. There's an owl. A lot of it I don't remember right off the top of my head. I just remember not especially liking it when I first read it. But I feel like it's one of those things that I would probably like it a lot more if I read it now. It is also Michael Avon Oeming drew it, and he is one of the artists I will just about buy anything he does sight unseen just because his name is on it. He is one of those guys, I really like his work, and I did love his drawing in that book. This, Go Power, from Atomic City Tales. This was weird. The art was good. I really liked the art. And I want to say that the Jay Stevens here, I feel like he, if I'm not mistaken, he worked on the Secret Saturdays cartoon from Cartoon Network. I think that's who that guy is. And that style looks very similar to that cartoon. And this was okay. It's about this guy who basically gets unlimited superpowers, and instead of becoming a superhero, he just kind of becomes a slacker. Like, I think the first thing he does is he forms a band when he gets superpowers, which, that can be fun, that can be kind of subversive, kind of, oh wow, I didn't expect that to happen, but at the same time, I didn't find it really exciting at all. It's very much, it's kind of like a Beavis and Butthead with superpowers, I guess, or South Park with superpowers. It's very jaded, very countercultural, and it's not really my cup of tea. I read this a few years ago. It was you know, some people are going to like it, but it's very underground. It's not trying to be appealing to someone like me, I don't think. I did not enjoy it, and I don't think it was meant for me to enjoy. I think it's meant for a specific group of people, and those people would probably like it. Like I mentioned the things that it reminded me of, and I feel like it's kind of in that wheelhouse, and if you like those kinds of things, you would probably like this. I've done a video on this book, Jersey Gods, I Would Live and Die for You. I'd Live and I'd Die for You. I did a video review of this last fall, sometime shortly after I had started doing YouTube videos, so I won't talk very much about this one, because you can go check out that video. Basically, though, it is kind of a spin on the Jack Kirby Fourth World stuff, but more of a romantic angle on it. Like I say, I won't talk much about it. The very first book that I ever read from one Rick Remender. Rick Remender is a huge name at Marvel right now, has been for a little while. He made his name, I know, from Punisher fans who really hated his Punisher run, where he turned Frank Castle into a Frankenstein's monster-type creature. This is one of his earliest works, called The End League. It was 2 volumes long. I only have the first volume, because it's not very good at all. It is really terrible. Guys, I do not have a lot of experience writing. Mostly my writing experience comes from nonfiction, like reviews, stuff like that. I feel like, having said that, I could have written a better book than this. This was so awful, guys. I'm not even exaggerating. This was really terrible. The problem I felt like, I mentioned this in my review, oddly enough, of the Jersey Gods. The problem was when you are doing an homage of something, and for example, the End League is basically all the characters in it are homages of Marvel and DC superheroes. So you've got a Wonder Woman equivalent, you've got a Superman equivalent, you've got a Ghost Rider equivalent. When you are doing a story that is an homage of existing things, I feel like you really do need to set out to do a story that could not be done in those original stories. And I feel like Remender halfway achieves that, in that this is a post-apocalyptic world, where the superheroes have caused the apocalypse. The problem is, I didn't find the characters to be very engaging. Even though you wouldn't be able to do a post-apocalyptic story in a Superman comic or in a Justice League comic, or if you did, it would not be a permanent story. I feel like these characters do not feel any different than Superman and Wonder Woman. The Superman guy right here, he feels exactly like Superman. The Wonder Woman character, she's exactly like Wonder Woman. It's not interesting at all. And it was really just, it felt like fan fiction. That is probably the worst insult you could lob at a professional comic book, but this did not feel like a good comic book at all. It was really terrible. And I know I said some time back I really did not like Remender's Uncanny Avengers. His Uncanny Avengers is light years ahead of this. I did not like his Uncanny Avengers, and it is so much better than this. It was, even when you don't like Remender, I feel like I don't know. I just don't even know. I don't know if it's just that he wasn't that good and he's gotten better, or if he just was having a bad day when he wrote that. I don't know. Code Flesh. This is written by Joe Casey. Joe Casey is a guy, I really love his work. Whenever he does stuff, he's the kind of guy, he doesn't so much care, this is what the fans are going to want to read. He writes what he wants to read himself, and then he just does what he wants to do. Now, that doesn't necessarily yield very popular results. I don't think Joe Casey has ever been a guy who tons and tons of people are fanning over his work. I know at times he has written Superman, and he was writing Uncanny X-Men when I first started reading comics, but for the most part, I feel like he's the kind of guy, he's more interested in just doing whatever he wants to do. And this is definitely something like that. It's a very interesting story. This guy here is a bounty hunter. He hunts down people who have escaped bail. This is, I think, a sort of somewhat superpowered world. He does not have superpowers, but it's definitely, it's got a little bit of that science fiction-y stuff in it, but it is a character story. It is not a concept story. It's not a this is a neat idea for a plot, let's try and make a story out of it. It is about the characters, and they're very interesting characters. They may not necessarily be likable characters, but I think sometimes that's real life, and sometimes you don't like the characters, but they can still be interesting. And I came away from this, I liked some of the characters, some of them I didn't like, but this is definitely a story I would recommend. I probably need to reread this someday soon and do a full-blown video on it, because there's a lot I think I could say about this. It's definitely an underrated story. I don't hear nearly enough people talking about this one. Monkey Man and O'Brien. This is from, I want to say, Dark Horse Comics, yeah. Around the time of the mid-90s, I guess, Art Adams, he's a very accomplished artist. I've just never really liked his work. He was working on X-Men annuals in the 80s, and every time I got to an X-Men annual when I was reading X-Men comics from the 80s, I was just always like, oh no, Art Adams again. And I don't know why. I cannot put my finger on why I don't like his art, but there's just something about it that doesn't do it for me. And this story, I got it for the concept more than the art, obviously, because I'm talking about how much I don't like Art Adams' work. This is a fun story. It's not going to change hearts and minds. This is not very deep or anything like that, but it's very fun and enjoyable. It's got a little bit of science fiction, old school science fiction from like the 50s, where a human brain is in a gorilla. It's that sort of thing. The story is not 100% original. You've got this girl here, her sister over here is evil, and there's a lot of it that feels like it's kind of riffing on other series and concepts, sort of. But it's fun. That's really what's important, I think. And this, at the end of the day, it's riffing on things that existed before it, but it still manages to feel very new and original, which is something that, for example, Rick Remender's The In League did not accomplish. So this is something that I wouldn't recommend paying a lot of money if you saw this in a store, but if it was a light week and you're looking for something to read, this is something that you might want to give a shot. It's pretty fun. Okay, here we have Black Summer by Warren Ellis and Juan Jose Rip. I don't know the artist. I'm not familiar with that artist's name. Obviously, Warren Ellis has done many different things. I've talked about a little bit in the past, not necessarily in this collection video or the previous collection video, but he's a somewhat well-known guy. The premise of this story, if you cannot tell from the cover, is that this superhero guy, I think his name was Horace, this superhero murders the President of the United States for war crimes against humanity. And so at that point on, this basically is a condensed, really compact version of the Marvel Comics Civil War, if that makes sense. It's superheroes versus superheroes, but this is not, I know I'm going to catch flack for this, this is not as pretentious as Mark Millar's Civil War. It's still quite a bit pretentious because this is a politically driven story, and I will go ahead and say I do not like politics, okay? I hate politics in the real world. I hate politics seeping into my comic books. I don't like it when I go to comics to enjoy myself and to have a good time, and I wind up getting hit over the head with the writer's political views. I don't entirely think that Warren Ellis is hitting us with his political views, because for most of the book you feel like he's going in one direction and then he kind of goes completely in the other direction at the end of the book, and that makes it very hard to peg exactly what Warren Ellis believes. So I'm not entirely sure if this book is a representation of his thoughts, or if this is just the characters think this, but Warren Ellis does not. Because it is a bad thing. When you are reading something, you do not need to make the mistake of thinking that the author's thoughts represent what the characters think. That is a mistake that a lot of people make sometimes. I'm sure I've made that mistake sometimes. I don't think that Warren Ellis necessarily agrees with everything that's going on here. For example, I'm pretty sure Warren Ellis would not want to murder the President of the United States. It is a very dark story. It's not at all something I would recommend for children. It's very, very graphic. What you see here is kind of sort of the representation of what you will be getting in the book. And if you are like me, if you do not like politics in your comics, then there's a good chance you're not going to like this. I think that the premise is very interesting. I just feel like it's not exactly something that I enjoyed. I don't know what I was expecting when I went into this, because keep in mind that I don't like politics. I think I knew the premise of this when I bought it. So I don't know why I bought this. I guess probably when I heard the premise, I thought that it sounded like a sort of more succinct, darker version of Marvel's Civil War. And I thought, well, that could be a lot of fun. Turns out fun is not exactly the word I would use to describe this. It's kind of a downer, but you might be into that sort of thing. If you like Warren Ellis, this is something you should probably give a shot. I don't think out of all of Warren Ellis's comic book career, this is probably one of his lesser known works. You might want to give it a shot if you're a fan of Warren Ellis. Now, this other book here, I'm finding a lot of these are kind of not in the best of shape. Armageddon. This is, I guess I'll just take this out. This is part 1 in a 3-part saga about the Antichrist. That kid right there, he is a demon child who used to be, I guess, an adult demon, and then he was reborn as this little kid. It's really in-depth. The mythology here is very complicated. I don't want to say it's confusing, because they spend, I guess that's like 300 pages. They are getting you through it. They're not just kind of brushing over all of this complicated mythology and then getting to a story. They're taking their time here. When I say they, this guy, Ronald Russell Roach. I have the other 2 volumes of this series, but I have not read them yet. And I read this last year, so it's been a while. And if you have seen any of my videos where I'm sitting in my room and you see the bookshelf behind me, you know that I have a lot of stuff on my to-read shelf. So that's why I haven't gotten to the rest of the series. But what I read here was really great. It's in black and white. I should go ahead and mention that. But the art is very simplistic. It's not, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's very simple, but it also gets the job done. It's very effective. And like what you're seeing here on the cover is very detailed compared to what's in the book. It's also not something for kids. This is very much a kind of a mature story. But it's not exactly what you think either. It's not like, okay, this is the rise of evil and evil wins. This is, in a way, if you, this is going to be a very peculiar comparison. If you ever watched Smallville, and you know how Smallville was about Clark was trying to find his destiny as this noble hero, well, this is the story about a little boy who's trying to find his destiny, and he does not want to become this devil child, and that's kind of what he is, and everyone is telling him that's what you are, and it's very interesting as a character story, and also just as a story, you're not entirely sure where this is heading when you're reading it. I've still got 2/3 of the whole saga to read, and I have no idea where it's going. And it's definitely something, if you see this in a used bookstore or something, I would suggest picking it up. I got all 3 of my volumes at different bookstores around me, and I really enjoyed this, so I'm looking forward to reading the rest. So that's definitely something that I feel like you guys should check out if you're looking for something new and interesting to read. Now, the rest of these books, I'm not going to pull every single one of them out, but as you can see, all of these books from here to here are all kind of uniform. They all kind of look the same, sort of. Maybe if I push them back, you can tell. See, these 8 books are all Hellboy books. And then these 3 books are set in the world of Hellboy, but they do not feature Hellboy himself. I have a very interesting love-hate relationship with Hellboy. I watched the 2 movies before I ever read the comic books. And then I got into the comic books. I think I got like 4 one Christmas. And I got through them and I thought, you know what? There's some interesting ideas here, but it's not quite there yet. It hasn't quite gotten to that point, because I had heard so many people talk the Hellboy series up as one of the greatest things in the world, and I thought, well, it must have been after Volume 4. It must be at some point in the future of the series where it finally gets good. So then, with my own money, I got the next 4-ish volumes, and over the years, I also got like the Abe Sapien books and Lobster Johnson. And anyway, 8 volumes into Hellboy, I still was not enjoying it. Now, there are some ideas in this series that are very interesting, very similar to Armageddon Quest, where this is the story of a man who is fighting his destiny, where people want to use him for evil means, and he wants to fight that destiny. He wants to forge his own path. It's similar to that. The problem I have is that each Hellboy story here is a separate miniseries. So this was like a Seed of Destruction miniseries, and then like some of these, like a couple of these books are like a collection of 2 or 3 short minis, and I feel like in doing so, what's his name, Mike Mignola, sometimes he's working with this very large, like 20-year ongoing story, and then sometimes he's just doing these little stories that have nothing to do with anything. I would rather he do one or the other. For those of you who keep up with my channel, you know that I am a gigantic X-Men fan. My favorite run on the X-Men is Chris Claremont's run that lasted from 75 to 91. In a way, I would consider all of the works of Chris Claremont and the X-Men to be one giant 16-year story. And I don't mind that, because, you know, you read that and you're just reading it and reading it. Now, there are times when it feels like, okay, this is the start of a new story, but in a way, it feels like it's one very long, ongoing story. But if you're going to just do a series of miniseries, and half of those minis don't feel like they have any impact on the character at all, I really don't feel like you should be trying to do that. And I feel like at a certain point, like near 7 or 8 or so, that's when like the first movie came out. So this started in like 94, 93, something like that. And it took him like 7 years to do 7 minis. And I know that he's not the fastest artist in the world. I know he drew, I think, all of this. He didn't draw the Abe Sapien and Lobster Johnson stuff, but I feel like he was just taking his sweet time. He had this idea for a very long story, and then 8 volumes in, he still had not gone anywhere with that story. And that was what made me stop reading Hellboy, stop caring about Hellboy. I didn't feel like it was very character-driven at all. I felt like it had the potential to be, but at the end of the day, I felt like the movies were more interesting than these comic books. Now, having said that, I really did enjoy Lobster Johnson. That was a really great story, and I even enjoyed the Abe Sapien books, just as like separate, like here's a miniseries featuring this character, and then here's another miniseries featuring the character. I really am interested in the world of Hellboy, and I still want to go and get the BPRD stuff, which I've heard the BPRD is better than Hellboy, but as for the main Hellboy series, I think I'm pretty much done. Now, I've heard there are a couple of volumes of, I think they're called Hellboy Tales, where it's other comic book artists and creators having a go at Hellboy without Mike Mignola involved. I would very much like to get those stories still, but as for Mike Mignola's ongoing, never-ending, never-progressing saga of Hellboy, I am most definitely done. And then that brings us to the final series here. Everything else here has to do with Grendel. Maybe my favorite creator-owned character ever. Matt Wagner, who if you're a fan of Batman, you've probably heard of Matt Wagner. He's done a few Batman stories in the last 8 or 9 years or so. Grendel was created by Matt Wagner. Basically, the idea is the first Grendel is a crime lord, a costumed crime lord, who he kind of sort of looks like Spider-Man with like a staff. There he is. Grendel is a costumed crime lord. I'm not going to pull all of these out. You're going to hear me talking while I video this. And he has a little bit of humanity, but for the most part, he is a scumbag. And he's got this iron hold on the city, and then through a certain chain of events that are largely his fault, his empire crumbles. And spoiler alert, he dies. He actually dies in the first Grendel story. This is technically not the first Grendel story. I do have the first one, I just haven't read it yet. But the very first one was, I think, supposed to be like a 5-issue miniseries, and then it did not get finished, and then he kind of retold the story from that first story here. And this is very experimental. It's more, well, no, that's actually a forward. Yep, I fail. Hold on, guys. You're gonna see this if it kills me. Okay, it's a lot of this, where you get pictures and you get text accompanying the pictures. If you don't like that sort of thing, you're gonna probably not dig Grendel. But I really, really love this stuff, guys. And what really captivated me was that Matt Wagner was not afraid to shake things up. He kills his main character in the first storyline. So you may be asking, what does he do after that? Well, basically, the idea of Grendel gets passed down. So for Hunter Rose, the first Grendel, the idea of Grendel was just a means to control the city. But then the next Grendel is a woman who is out to avenge the death of her child. So the idea of Grendel for her is just a means of revenge. And then the idea of Grendel keeps getting passed down through the generations. So by the time you get like here, it is like several hundred years in the future. And it starts off feeling like a crime noir type story set in modern day New York, which this series started in the 80s, so modern day is relative. And then by the time you get to the stuff that was going on in like the mid 90s, it's set like hundreds of years in the future. But if you only like Hunter Rose, there's still a few stories here like Red, White, and Black and Black, White, and Red. Both of those are anthology stories with various artists putting their own spin on Hunter Rose. So if you prefer this guy, the first Grendel, there's plenty of stories that just involve him. But if you want to see the evolution of this concept, both as a character and as a series, you really do need to just hunt all of this down. It's really fantastic. I cannot recommend this stuff enough. I could probably do a full-blown video just talking about Grendel and how much I want to make babies with all of this stuff. Here toward the end, we have Batman Grendel. So, like, Grendel has had some run-ins. This version of Grendel had a run-in with Batman, and then Grendel Prime, this guy, had a run-in with Batman. And those stories were okay. I actually enjoyed the Grendel Prime thing better than the Hunter Rose Batman story. And I believe I read recently that Matt Wagner is planning on... sorry, guys, I am terrible at multitasking here. I read recently that Matt Wagner is planning on doing a Shadow Grendel crossover. So if you're a fan of the Shadow, or if you want to get into Grendel and you're thinking, well, this is all kind of overwhelming, there's a lot of books here, well, maybe you should check out the Matt Wagner, what he's going to be doing with the Shadow and Grendel. I guess it's coming up within the next year. I would recommend doing that, because I'm definitely going to be picking that up when it comes out in trade. And that is everything on this shelf, guys. This did not take as long as last time, so I'm happy about that. If you had any questions about anything, maybe you're not happy that I didn't pull every one of these books out. If you wanted to ask questions about Grendel, because there's a lot of these books I did not talk about at all, feel free to shoot me a comment in the comments section. If you think that I'm an idiot because I can't put a book on the shelf while holding a camera, you would be correct, because I am an idiot. That's all I have here, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you will like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will check you guys out tomorrow with another kind of video. I will see you then. Have a great day.